Welcome to the Cineposium podcast. I'm Martin Ibarra Ramos, and my co-host Alex Abasella might be joining us a little late today, so I'll let you guys know if and when they are able to come back on the show. In case you missed our last episode, curated by Li-Wen Wong, we discussed two films available on Netflix, The Half of It and Tiger Tail. And we had a great conversation about the culture and representation in both films, so highly recommend that you guys check out those films as well as our episode because there's some really great stuff going on. And now I'll let you guys know how the show works. So every week we'll invite members or collaborators of Cineposium to curate a film for remote viewing and have a conversation about said film. New episodes will be published every Thursday with various members from Cineposium to discuss the films with our weekly curators. This week's weekly curator is Ben Lee, and we also have Li-Wen Wong back on the show to join in on the conversation. So, Ben, I'll invite you to take it away and introduce your film for this episode.
Thank you, Martin and Li-Wen. So, a little background. DAU started as a feature film by Ilya Khrzhanovskiy to record the life of the Soviet physicist Lev Landau. And then in 2009, he started to expand this film into a bigger project. So he found this spot in Kharkiv, Ukraine, which is a derelict swimming pool, and transformed it into what he calls the Institute for Research in Physics and Technology. He then put many people from different backgrounds and disciplines in real life. For example, scientists, artists, waitress, secret police people, and so on. So to like basically live there. So for 3 years they live, they work, they fall in love, they give birth in the institute, throughout which Khrzhanovskiy occasionally does the filming. So it has been a extremely controversial project, especially in a human rights perspective. Because of this, I keep thinking about like what the significance of this 700 hours of footage at this moment in our world. Of course, the argument still stands that it is nothing besides Khrzhanovskiy's ambition and nostalgia, and people are arguing against each other to see if this project is raising the bar for cinematic arts, or is just breaking the bottom line of human ethics. So I want to share my thoughts on it for a moment. So to me, cinema's function in DAU is quite interesting, and by cinema I do not only mean the medium, but also the entire production process, including acting, staging, directing, cinematography, and everything else. So cinema is the starting point of this project, obviously, and Khrzhanovskiy made sure that everybody in the cast is notified and clarified that what they are participating in is completely made up. It's completely fictional, and they are not bound to any kind of concentration camp. But as time goes by, I can see that cinema is becoming more and more invisible in this project. So I would like to say, I don't know if Khrzhanovskiy is doing this on purpose, but my observation is that this project seems to reenact my understanding of Althusser's interpolation process, and with cinema functioning as what he calls the ideological state apparatus. So in Nikita Tanya's case, which is the film of our program, so this film is really, to me, is a really moving and compelling film. The emotions are looking so spontaneous and authentic, and they provoke my true feelings. So how can, but they are not like actors and actresses. They are like real life physicists and his wife. So I think a way Khrzhanovskiy achieves this type of authentic acting is through this interpolation process, and to make all these people from different backgrounds method actors. I don't know if method actor is the right term to categorize this school of acting, But I do remember there's this school of acting which believes that, for example, if I were to portray a person that is totally different from me, I'm not going to like merely imitate that person, nor am I going to just, come up with a set of imaginations about that character and just delve myself into that imaginary world, both on set and off set. Instead, I am going to just be myself all the time, and invoke my own feelings, affections, and love. The only thing is that my circumstances, my outside environments, my backgrounds have changed to that characters. So then I realized that, the reason why Nikita and Tanya as a physicist and his wife can be such compelling performers, they have lived there for 3 years, and it's basically their 3-year rehearsal. So Khrzhanovskiy basically is using these 3 years to change the circumstance and environment of these people living in the institute. And by the time of filming, they have already internalized this alternate version of themselves in the Soviet Union between 1938 and 1968. So as I understand, Althusser's interpolation process involves the consensual, mutual recognition of one's identity between her and the ideology which dictates her identity. So when you hail Nikita Nekrasov in DAU's world, he's going to answer you because he is Nikita, only in another dimension. So for example, in the cast page of Nikita Tanya, if you click on Nikita Nekrasov, you will see that his bio is not according to his real life, but it's totally made up to fit the DAO universe. And you are made to believe that, Nikita Nekrasov is a real person from the Soviet era. But if you go out of that website and go to Wikipedia, you will see that Nikita Nekrasov is a real person who's only 40 years old and who's like teaching in Princeton. So to me, this kind of very overplaying of this fictionalization is kind of a transcendent version of fictional films in general. Right, where we are led to believe that Tom Hanks is someone else, but in other films it's only on screen. While in DAO you have no idea the boundaries and limits of its fictionalization. So therefore, in conclusion, of course, I will take forever to understand this project, and I have so many other installments in this series to watch. But I just want to say that this project, the impression of this project to me is in part like a self-reflexive presentation of cinema, along with filmmaking and acting process as essentially ideological interpolation.
Wow, thank you, Ben. I have to say a couple things right off the bat. First, I'm almost a little depressed that I didn't get to hear this before my actual screening of this film, because it's really helping me understand a lot of what's going on. I'll say I'd never heard of the DAO project before your sort of pitch for the film for this week's episode. And so the only thing that I knew about the film going in was its short synopsis I found online. And I hadn't considered it as this sort of blending of forms of fiction and nonfiction, and expanding what that sort of blending can look like in combination with a process of interpolation. That's truly in itself just a fascinating concept. And so I'll say I enjoyed the film. Just as my reaction, I enjoyed the film in some ways, and in some ways it might have, I think I was working my mind around things, and it is, I'll say, a slow film, although that's not necessarily the biggest problem for me, because as you guys know, my research involves documentary and cinema verite, and so a lot of that involves this sort of observational style in which these long takes are spent, and there's a lot of internal sort of examination, and we experienced with characters on screen small moments, and there was a lot of that in this film. And so I got that much, but I have to say this added element to it is really fascinating me, to the degree of I wouldn't necessarily say I was when I finished the film, but now I am at the point where I would say I'm interested to see more of the films from this project, because this is really a truly, just a fascinating sort of concept and idea to approach cinema with. Li Wen, your thoughts on the film?
Oh, right. Like right when I finished watching the film, I thought, oh, perhaps this is like a fictional film, because I know this is like a project the director is trying to build a Soviet Union world, but I didn't know how he navigate or how he wrote these films. But then when I saw like the crew list, their names are actually the names they are in the film. I then started to do a lot of researching, and also echoing what you said, it's quite a fascinating idea, but I'm not sure it's in a good way or a bad way. But this endeavor to build a Soviet Union world, and I suppose actually came through, is certainly eye-opening. And I think I saw from the website that there's a bunch of films being done in this doll project, and I'm not sure about the other films, but this is quite poignant and poetic. And it's actually not what I was expecting from this project, because perhaps my initial expectation for a Soviet Union film would be, especially when he's recreating a place, I thought perhaps it would more be about the downside of the Soviet Union, but then it's not. It's focusing on the internal emotions, and it's like and also it's very interesting to see how like Nikita is being scientific, and he's trying to lure his wife into his polygamy ploy. And plus I think what Ben was talking about, the acting part, it was also the first thing that jumped into mind, because what's his name? I think it's a Russian performer that I think it's also a Russian performer that came up with the idea of what he was talking about. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but I think it's
Stanislavski.
yes, I think it's derived from a Stanislavski method, which is like one of the three biggest performing system in the world. I think the other two being Brecht and Meilan Fang in China. And so I think because I took a class in that, and the class was talking about that Stanislavski's method was very much emphasizing on the actor not alienating itself from its character, but trying to be unified with the character. So like in Brecht's theater, you would see that he would constantly want to like break the wall and then have kind of like a meta theater and talking with the audience. But in Stanislavski's method, he would rather them to invoke their inherent emotions and to kind of be one, like aligned with the character. And it's interesting because this and the DAO project both has Russian root, but I don't know much about Russian art, so I can't say much. But so that's certainly something I'll look into. Yes, the acting aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that is one of the areas. I mean, this felt a lot like the films that I researched, and so I think that's what had me sort of interested throughout. There's these elements of that which I wasn't aware of, but now I feel even stronger about the fact that there are these sort of non-actors involved. Additionally, the use of handheld cameras, or seemingly for the most part handheld, and what felt at first like discrete editing, although eventually cuts start to feel a little more abrupt. But there's a lot of these longer takes where it feels they're really trying to hide cuts, and so it truly feels like this observational approach to looking at humanity and looking at simple themes like what parenting can do to a husband and wife, what exhaustion can do in a way. And obviously it gets much further than that, but I found it interesting that in this what felt like a sort of grander setting and concept, to me became much more about humanity, and I was really fascinated by that, and I think I appreciate that very much so in retrospect as well. So yeah, there's a lot to me that in this sort of approach to cinema that I really appreciate.
Yeah, yeah, and your input is useful because I'm not, I'm generally not very like acute when watching a film, on cinematography and editing and stuff. But those are very like valuable thing to pay attention to, and I believe you are what you mentioned about they are trying to hide edits and stuff. I think that's a really brilliant observation, and that can add to the idea that they are trying to make like the filming process basically disappear, while they are obviously like surveilling their everyday life, and there's I remember the director of photography of this film is intentionally trying to hide the camera, is not, and he's like using many like techniques to try to not break the lighting of the room and the structure of the building, just to serve the filming. Instead, he's trying to like make the filming process as smooth as possible. And I believe like why does he want to do that is a very interesting question. Like why does all of them want to like make the filming process disappear if this project is in essence a film project? Why does they want to make film like disappear? I think that's something that's worth considering.
Absolutely, I took note of the use of natural lighting as well, and loved some of those walking scenes in which they're coming in and out of light, and we see their shape but not really their faces, and there was even in that some of the sort of camera movements within those moments I thought were also really nicely done. And to what you're bringing up, I think, so for me, something I pay attention to in cinema verite is, I think it's interesting that those films have a sense of, they can be experiential, and that does something for the audience, at least for me, and I think usually to a certain degree is intended, at least by some filmmakers, to bring the audience in closer to the character's perspective, perhaps in their shoes, and to empathize with them. And so I think certainly there was that, and I think intent here, in my interpretation, because I certainly had strong feelings throughout the film. I have to say, it's a frustrating situation, what was going on between these characters, and I think there's also a difference in culture, which is interesting to consider because, and perhaps age as well. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh, what would I do in this situation? If someone really wants to have their, girlfriend or other boyfriend living next door, I'm going to be pretty upset about that. At that point, I'm going to say, you're out the door, but it's interesting to, I guess have a stronger attachment in that way, and consider how I might do things differently. I certainly think that has to be an intention from the filmmakers, in my opinion.
Right, and that's, yeah. I'm glad to hear that you also have a lot of feelings when watching this film, and I think it has to do with the authenticity of their performance. I think I've heard somewhere or read somewhere that Khrzhanovskiy rarely uses scripts and to like or like 5% of direction, and the other 95% is for them to just basically do impromptu. And the interesting thing is that the director of photography is actually German, I believe, and he had no idea what they are saying because they are speaking in Russian, and Khrzhanovskiy doesn't give him scripts or direction as well. So he's basically observing the moment and just to catch them without understanding a word of those characters, and those characters are basically most of the time they are improvising. And I remember there's because the two of the 14 films are screened in the Berlin film festival, and one of them is Natasha. And the main character of Natasha, whose name is Natasha, did a lot of like improvising, and there's a very like intense scene where she's drunk and she's sitting on the ground and questioning her life, like what am I doing, and what's all this purpose, and she's basically burst into like a frenzy of self abasement and self questioning. And that scene is basically all her, like there's no directing involved, and she's drunk, she's truly drunk, and she's just saying all that, and it's hard to not to think that maybe this is her state of mind. She does feel a little like confused when she has involved in this project for 3 years. And also similarly in this film, I recorded a quote from Nikita at the beginning of the film, when he's walking with his wife at night, and he told his wife, I try to shove myself into a little box, into some limits, into some kind of bunker where I just keep turning the same handle round and round. I just do everything that needs to be done. Instead of taking off, I try to find axes with which I hack off a couple more of my feathers, and then I suffer and wonder why I'm in such pain. I think this, I think it's beyond, his family matters. Sometimes he's really speaking from his heart, and about what is something we might never understand, but this kind of true and authentic and original expression of emotion and feeling and thought I think is what makes this film really compelling, even though none of these quote unquote actors and actresses are actually professional performers.
Yeah, I was also, because now that you're talking about this, I'm now even more like, I'm wondering how the director is doing his direction, and perhaps how acting in this project plays out, or that perhaps one of his goals would be to be completely rid of the idea of acting or professional acting. But I don't know, because I'm not sure would that resonate greatly with like Martin and Cinema Verite, that they would want to be rid of the idea of acting or not.
This element is really interesting to me too, because it's just pointing out a degree of spontaneity that I was not aware of in watching the film. And I think that in Cinema Verite, that's the films I watch and study are all documentaries, and so they're of course non-actors, but I feel that in general the lack of direction and interference from the filmmaker in general on camera is to observe and record revelations, right, to understand. And so that's truly fascinating when I consider how that might play out with this film, because some of those long moments before, I'm thinking, okay, why are we just sitting here? But now it's making me think so much more, and almost to the degree of, do I need to watch this again? Because there must be so much more going on than I was able to pick up on. Although I certainly understood that feeling, and just a sense of empathy was kind of the point. And I agree with you what you said before, Lee, that it feels quite poetic. And there's a sort of rhythm to it that I did find quite nice. But yeah, this is really interesting because I don't know that I've ever seen a film like this.
So I'm just curious. Do you personally like this film, like compared to other films you watched?
Oh yeah, I do. I'll say I feel stronger about it now though. I think there was. It wasn't that I didn't like the film after just watching it. I think, and I watched it with my wife. We both had a feeling of like frustration with the characters, but we both agreed like we like the film though. And in terms of execution, I think it's actually really, really well done. And even though there's these qualities of handheld camera and moving cameras, and in that way a sense of anxiety that's kind of burned into the film, I think aesthetically it's very strong, and I think it certainly is able to conjure the kind of themes and emotions that are intended to be felt in the audience. So I certainly think it's a successful film, and I liked it before, and now I like it even more, I would say.
Yeah, I'm planning to watch the other. There's another installments in the series called Degeneration, I believe, and it's like 6 hours. I have been like spending days and days to find courage to find and time to watch this, but it seems to be like a very provoking film when it was screened in Berlin Film Festival along with Natasha. So yeah, I'll watch The Generation first because I can't find Natasha in the website. It seems to be because Nikita Tanya is just a small like corner of all these films, and the character Nikita can be seen. I think he can be seen in The Degeneration and other films as well. And I think The Generation will I don't know will talk bigger topics, I don't know, but only Nikita Tanya has already provoked my like emotions and stuff. I'd say it's a really interesting, and I don't know, it's really because I'm thinking about like how to like, should I like read this film at all? Like am I overreading this film and saying Althusser, and I feel like it's a little, maybe it's a little too much, but I was like trying to find something to say about this film, but maybe it's just like you said, like you put brilliantly, like it's basically, maybe it's just experiential, like just experience the film, experience this time period, and they're like almost real life inside of this like Soviet, the architecture are all like Soviet style, which is just awesome. I just love those architecture, and it's just brutalist and stuff. I grew up with those kind of architectures actually, but not that brutalist, but all Soviet style are buildings. So it's kind of an interesting project for me personally.
Yeah, and I would say that the location in the film, I think, is attached to the characters in a way that's really interesting. When you consider, especially when you consider all the films that are apparently taking place in this area, if that's correct, the sense of attachment to those buildings, to this sense of, I don't know if I want to say isolation, but yeah, there certainly feels like there's something there below the surface that I think is really interesting. So absolutely appreciated the architecture and its place within the frames, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know why, but still, and I don't know why Soviet. I find I'm looking for a film that's recreating a Soviet era, but Khrzhanovskiy seems to have this like weird attachment to that time period, and I just found that fascinating because I'm not necessarily like attached to, but I do like Soviet style, but Khrzhanovskiy seemed to be a little crazy about it. Yeah.
How many of the other films within the DAO project have you seen to this point?
So I've seen this one and another one called Brave People. It's about how after Stalin's death, the scientists in the institute have to carry on their research, but at the same time, the I'd say the Soviet security department is a little frustrated, and they are giving pressure to these scientists, so they are living in increased pressure, and every night they are trying to hear the footsteps in on the staircase, and try to see who that person is, and every day they are living in fear. And that has some kind of foreshadowing of Degeneration, because I haven't seen Degeneration, but I've heard that it's about basically the end of the Institute in 1968, the fictional end of this entire world, in which everybody is basically their experiment is secret, and they are trying to create, I believe, superhuman or whatever, and the superhuman started to have more and more power, and they started to tout what is it called, Darwinism or something, and then they started to do this purging, and then while other scientists are starting to get more and more stressed out and start to collapse, and they start to indulge into I'd say sex and alcohol and stuff, and so I only watched these two films. One is Brave People, one is Nikita Tanya, and I think Nikita Tanya and another film, String Theory, is they are connected. They are all about Nikita and his family. I haven't seen String Theory yet, so I only watched 2 of the 14 films. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, interesting. And it's interesting that you say there are multiple films that are sort of about Nikita, because I think he's an interesting character, and I have thoughts about him. But I'm wondering if you guys, if before we wrap up, any quick thoughts on Nikita and Tanya and what's going on between them, if you have any feelings about it or any predictions as to what will happen to them. Just curious of you guys' thoughts on them.
Oh, yeah, you can go first. Yeah.
No, because I was also just looking at the website, and I was just reading about the string theory, and I think the string theory will be about how Nikita is attempting to disclose his ploy of polygamy with the 3 women of his life. So yeah, that would be quite interesting to watch also.
Oh.
But I don't know, would this film be a placement before Nikita and Tanya, or would Nikita and Tanya be an extension of the string theory? But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I feel like Nikita in this film is one thing that's similar. One thing that Nikita does that's similar to what Khrzhanovskiy does in general in this project is that Nikita is trying to test the limit. He's experimenting. You never see his other girls in this film. He's basically saying everything to his wife in theory, but he really does the cheating, And he is, but he is doing, but he is, you know, covering his cheating in a theoretical manner and scientific manner, and he is, you know, he's basically leading, not leading, but he's like experimenting with his wife. I guess he's treating all these as a like science experiment, and he's testing the limits, just like, you know, how Khrzhanovskiy is testing the limit of filmmaking, I guess.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just love the way you put that, Ben, but please go ahead, Leewin.
No, yeah, exactly. I was very interested in how he was talking about limits and bottom line, and he's trying to open a discussion with his wife between this and also blending with perhaps his own idea of limit and bottom line and how you would want to challenge it or you would not want to challenge it. Yeah.
Boy, you guys are giving me a lot to think about, and really helping me sort of grasp with this film, because I do think it's challenging, but I always appreciate a film that can do that and that can ask a lot of me during the watch and after the watch. So really really great stuff here with this conversation, guys. I think we do have to wrap up with that. So I'd like to say thank you to both of you for joining. Leewin, thank you for coming back, and Ben, thank you for programming this film. I hope to have you guys back on the show soon.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and we hope you all enjoyed the conversation, and whether you're a returning listener or if this is your first time with us, we appreciate you tuning into the show. Please subscribe to the show on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please spread the word. You can follow us on Instagram at Cineposium and on Twitter at Cposium to keep up with our updates and to keep in communication with us. If you're interested in subscribing to our weekly e-newsletter, email us at cineposium.ucla@gmail.com. Thank you all again for listening. Until next week, take care, everyone.